Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Canada's podcast. I'm your host, Bonnie LG, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Adam Temple from Inline Group, headquartered in Edmonton, as our special guest. Today, we're going to dig into Adam's career as an entrepreneur, some of the hard lessons he's learned along the way. We're also going to talk about his deep commitment to community and how he's integrating that passion into the corporate culture at Inline Group. So Adam, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. It's a pleasure. Thanks for making the time.
Awesome. Well, before we get into some of our questions, it would be great if you could introduce yourselves to our listeners and just tell us a little bit about your personal journey as an entrepreneur.
Sure, I'd love to. I guess first and foremost, I'm a husband and a dad of two little boys. So I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So as much as I'm an entrepreneur, I'm in the thick of dad life, that's for sure. So
those are the fun times.
Yeah, those are the fun times, and they take up most of my day for sure. But so entrepreneurial journey. I moved to Alberta in 2007. I came from St. John's, Newfoundland, with the intention of coming to Alberta to work in Banff or go to Jasper and kind of live this free life and escape school is kind of how my journey started. Well, I'll go back a little bit further. As a child, my parents tell me I was very independent, and I was kind of always wanted to do things on my own and do things myself. And as I worked into my teenage years, my mom and dad got divorced, and I lived with my father. And he was a working man. He was a tradesman. He was a carpenter by trade, and long hours, long days, and that kind of left me to quote unquote fend for my own. So once again, just very independent, kind of in control of my own fate. So I came to Alberta, and with that in mind, I think I got the taste of the opportunity in Alberta. And everyone knows that this is I think this is a great province for opportunity, and there's a ton of opportunity out here for the right person. So I landed in Alberta in 2007, heading to Banff, and I quickly learned about the oil sands. I'd never heard of the oil sands before. I heard about the money I had, the opportunity of the money I had to make up there. So I headed to Fort McMurray, and lo and behold, I was making $70,000 or $80,000, kind of just boom, as quick as I could get there. And I guess that kind of transformed Bonnie a little bit into, I seen the opportunity, and I still had that want and that need to kind of be the controller of my own fate. And in 2012, my business partner and I, Ryan Dunbar, co-founded Inline Construction Surveys. And from there, the company evolved. So we were part of some major projects in the Fort McMurray region, and I think the rest is history, and I'm sure we'll dig into it as the chat goes on here. But that's a quick overview of how we got started.
And so maybe tell us a little bit, like, what are the services that Inline provides, and where did you see there was that opportunity in the market, to maybe address needs that weren't being met, or just that there was so much opportunity, there was space for Inline?
Yeah, for sure. So 2012, it was pretty busy in the oil sands. So we provide construction surveying is what we started out as, and we've evolved since then. But in 2012, there was a lot of big companies providing the services that we wanted to provide. So, we seen that opportunity to kind of slide in and be a little bit more of a small ma and pop boutique shop that just really concentrated on service. And we'll touch on this in a little bit later, but they were solely dedicated to profit, right? Like that's what they were concerned about. And Ryan and I are very much so the opposite, right? The customer comes first, our employees come first. We're very much so concentrated on those two items. So that was kind of I think what started that is we were kind of fed up and we were kind of sick of working for these companies that had people sitting in an ivory tower, as some people call it, but sitting in an ivory tower just telling you what you can't do, not so much what you can do, but just that restriction. But yeah, so to back up a little bit, currently as of today, so we provide geotechnical engineering, materials testing, and surveying services for generally large companies across Canada. We pursue logistically challenged and remote projects throughout all of Canada. So the best way for me to describe that is imagine taking all of our provinces, cutting them in half. Everything in the north of our provinces is where we generally pursue work.
So that brings up a very interesting question. It sounds like you go after maybe those projects that are more difficult and challenging. And so what is it about that type of work that attracts you, and why have you kind of made that the niche for Inline Group?
Yeah, it's certainly challenging, to say the least. First and foremost, it's right in how we phrase it. It's very logistically challenged, but it's just what we know, right? I think that's the main reason why we pursue this. It's kind of the DNA of our company. It's the expertise and the skills that we've developed over the last 9 years suit those projects. However, it also levels the playing field. So you can imagine for Inline to try to go compete in the Greater Toronto region right now would probably be impossible, right? Because we're competing with local firms, with local people. However, when we compete in a place like Timmins, Ontario, the local competition is lessened, right? So it kind of levels that playing field, and generally everyone is bringing workforce from outside of the region, which gives Inline an opportunity to kind of provide pricing and hopefully win work within the region. So.
And are you a person, would you describe yourself as someone who likes adventure and challenge? Like, is that part of what has kind of fed this evolution to focus on that type of work?
Yeah, so not only myself, my business partner, many people say, your business partnership is one of, if not one of the most important partnerships you ever have, just as important as marriage. And Ryan and I are very lucky to be as aligned as we are, but for sure. So we both love a challenge. And I think that's really what feeds this. I think it would be easy enough for us to really concentrate on Edmonton, where our main office is located, but these logistically challenged and remote projects are just that. They're really challenged, they're tough, and they're really rewarding, right? Because generally it's big projects that are talked about throughout the entire country, right? So something like the Fort Hills project in Fort McMurray that just got finished, I think it was finished maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but it was the talk of the country when it was being built, right? And it, it's a bit of pride, I guess, saying that we're working on some of the largest projects throughout our country is a little bit of fun.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd love to maybe back up a bit, Adam, and talk a bit. Like, you started Inline at quite a young age, 22, and came out and sounds like you really built your career from the ground up, didn't have connections or that you pulled on right away. Can you share maybe a lesson or two or an experience where you really had to overcome some hardship and obstacles? And, I think of our listeners, and many of them in particular over the last 18 months. I mean, it's been a really difficult time, and we can draw on stories from entrepreneurs, who can share experiences of how they've overcome, or maybe how you've pivoted, not necessarily in COVID, but at other times in your careers, and been able to adapt and get over those obstacles that can sometimes seem insurmountable to start.
Yeah, this is, I feel like I have so many to pull on, Bonnie, but I was assuming this question would come up, and one, it just continually pops to mind. So, Ryan and I started, and we were two guys from the field, right? We didn't have any business experience, no financial experience. So 2012 we started, and we realized that our biggest gap was going to be our bookkeeping and our financial management part of our business. So we searched out a bookkeeper, or someone to look over our finances and pay our people and kind of do the checks and balances, and we were very trusting at that time. So we let this person kind of have free reign, and at the end of the month, they'd give us a P&L to say, hey, you guys made some money. And, at that time, we just high-fived each other like, heck, man, we're really doing this. In 2014, we switched our accounting firms to MNP. And our accountant from MNP was like, guys, something's just not adding up here. So after they did some in-depth digging, we found out that bookkeeper, that person that we thought was taking care of us so well, had actually stolen over $300,000.
Oh my, wow.
Yeah, so luckily, our business was still doing well and still, still able to survive that. But I think the biggest lesson there, and the biggest, you ask about challenges, was really the mental challenge on that one. Especially for me, Ryan, at this time in 2014, we had kind of evolved, and Ryan was kind of the field guy, and I was the office guy, and so the office and the finance side of the business was mine. And to kind of get that dagger put in you to say, hey, you lost the company $300,000. So that was a huge mental barrier to come over. Luckily I did, but there's so many lessons to come out of that. But if I was to give one lesson to a young entrepreneur that's starting, I would say don't be afraid to ask a stupid question, or what you deem as a stupid question. I think I could have protected myself a lot more by asking my unknowns. I was very much so afraid to say, hey, Miss Bookkeeper, can you explain this to me? Because it doesn't make sense. In my head, I kind of spun it up to say, oh, well, I don't know anything about finance. That's got to be right. I think that person's doing what they need to do. But, as an owner, an entrepreneur, the leader of the business, I think you have a right to understand everything, even though if you're going into the conversation without the understanding or the skill set, and you have to ask 10 extra questions, I think that's your right. So
well, that's
so
good.
that's my biggest one. There's tons, Bonnie, but I think that's the one that I could really draw on, and I still to this day I think of that scenario and always go back to it, right?
So how have you had the resilience to survive in an industry that is very cyclical? It's very up and down. And certainly, I mean, you've been through cycles now, just by virtue of how long Inline has been around. How do you ride through those times, and how do you still find a way to build a strategy, for success and growth?
Yeah, such a big question, hey. So first and foremost, I'll say I don't think we really had a strategy up until recently. So I would say my one comment here would, I think we were just very opportunistic for our first 8 years. So anything that was presented in front of us, we were very quick to react, and we were very adaptable. I think that's been the big one that we could always draw on to say, throughout our 8 years, we weren't set in stone to say this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to do it. we were very adaptable, right? So we changed as our industry changed. And as well, as the I think the famous things go, we diversified in 2018 and added that Geotechnical Engineering and Materials Testing division, which has been it's now makes up 30% of our business, which is amazing. So that's been a huge key to our success in the last nine years. And then third, I think just relationships for us. It just truly comes back to relationships, and a lot of those people that we've initially worked with in 13 and 14 and 15, I've now moved on to other projects somewhere in Western Canada or even across Canada, and we've been able to maintain those relationships, and we've been lucky enough that they just kind of take us to the next project, and that's how we've very much so organically grown over the last 8 or 9 years here.
Well, and I know one of the things, Adam, that you've mentioned is really important to you is around giving back to community, and that's really one of the pillars of Inline today. Can you tell us a bit about, first of all, why that's such a passion of yours, and then how do you make that part of your corporate culture? How is it part of just the way that you conduct yourselves? We hear a lot of lip service to corporate social responsibility and that type of thing, but interested to hear how you've been able to infuse that into your organization.
Yeah, for sure. And it certainly is something that's important to me. It's always been important to me, and I think it comes from my grandparents. Both sides of my grandparents were very much so involved in their communities, and I might have skipped a generations with my parents. They were very much so worker bees, and we didn't do a lot of that as children, but it's something my grandparents kind of instilled in me from a young age. But on my journey throughout the last 9 years, it's only recently that we've started really, making a concerted effort and making it a part of our strategy. And that stems from me reading a book called The Triple Bottom Line, right? And that's where it kind of all started. And, I think one story really stuck out to me. It's about the Hershey factory. So we all know Hershey bars. And the story goes that, the Hershey board just decided that they were going to sell the business to the highest bidder at one point in their living. And the entire community, so it was in Hershey, Pennsylvania, I think is the town's name. So obviously that town was fueled by this Hershey factory, and the millions of dollars that it would have pumped into that community. So they found out through a newspaper article. So the community wasn't consulted, the community wasn't talked about, and that's all these people's jobs, right? So what had happened is essentially the entire community protested this sale, right? So and the buyers of Hershey wouldn't buy it because they seen the disruption that it was causing, and then obviously they were afraid that it was going to disrupt, if they bought Hershey, well, their production, are these people going to come back to work? Are we actually going to have a business to actually buy? It just really stuck with me. Those people sitting around a boardroom were making the best decision that they could in terms of profit, right? But there's so many other ways to measure the success of a business. And that really what it comes back to me. So you ask about community investment. That's just a piece of it. I think that's very important to invest in our communities, and that's generally the way most companies say that they're they care about other than profit is they'll write a check, or they'll kind of like you said, they'll kind of do lip service. That is a little bit of lip service, right? Just write a check. It's easy. It's kind of it's quick, and there's not a lot of stuff that needs to be done. But I think just caring about all stakeholders and people that are involved from the business is really where we kind of try to put rubber to pavement, I guess. Mm-hmm. And that starts with just communication and transparency around our whole business. So something as simple as every quarter we'll reveal our entire business to our people. That includes our profit and loss, that includes our balance sheet, that includes everything. So including people in that discussion and letting people know what our business is about and how healthy or unhealthy it is. That's a really big piece for me. Employee ownership, employee profit sharing is another one. So we're really going through some steps right now to bring in some employee ownership, and then for those that necessarily don't want to be an owner, we'll have employee profit sharing as well. So much like in the book, the triple bottom line, I think there is a sweet spot. So there's triple bottom line is there's three real key pieces. There's the profit, which I think first and foremost is as much as people talk about this triple bottom line, the business still needs to make money to be able to do all these other initiatives. And then there's the people, and then there's the planet. So when it speaks to people, it's just, are you considering all of your stakeholders that are involved? So that's both internal and external stakeholders. And then the environment is very much so straightforward. Like, are we doing the best we can to protect and preserve our environment? Generally, there's a sweet spot, right? So not all businesses, and I'll use Inline, there's not a ton that we can do to change our business to help the environment per se. Now we can certainly go pick garbage up off the side of the road or do something along those lines, but we don't affect the environment with what we do, right? We go out in the field and we look at things and we assess things. We're not really disturbing the environment. So the two pieces that we really focus on are the profit and the people, right? So external, internal stakeholders, we care about their entire journey. But someone like Suncor Energy, let's say, they would probably care about all facets of that triple bottom line, right? And they very much so do. But they have the ability to change their business to positively affect the environment, whereas a company like Inline may not have that opportunity, because until we can drive electric pickup trucks, there's not a ton that we can do to change our business. So
Right.
it's such a huge topic, Bonnie, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning about this today and every day moving forward, but it is near and dear to my heart. We hire and fire based on that. Many of our people, if not all, are very much so ingrained in that as well.
Mm-hmm. So what's next for you with the company? Like, where do you hope to be in 5 years?
Yeah, so I hope the business is just sustainable in 5 years. I hope we continue growing. I hope we've hit some of our targets to put a regional presence across the country, and hopefully just keep up with this crazy world that we're in. Our industry is changing so much year by year. There's so much technology, so just trying to keep up with that.
And I'd like to maybe shift gears just for a few minutes, Adam, as we start to wind down our chat. But you and I, when we were talking before we started the interview, you mentioned that you are a lifelong learner and you really love to learn. And I'm wondering, are there some other books besides The Triple Bottom Line, which you've already referenced, or podcasts or different resources that you could share with our listeners that you find helpful as you are continually evolving and growing as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple books that really come to mind is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, by Patrick Lencioni. And I just think that book helped me so much when I got started, and I still reference it pretty well every day or every week. And there's also a system called EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System, also known as like Scaling Up. There's a couple different ones out there, but I think that's what really took us from just a bare bones entrepreneurial company to a company that has a little bit of processes and procedures. So they have a whole series of books, but you could just look them up online. It's EOS, and I think those books are fantastic. And it's just some basic tools that you could use to kind of really help your business grow.
Awesome. I think those are really helpful. So is there anything else, Adam, that you'd like to share, either about your experience or just even how you're feeling in terms of, we are seeing our economies start to come out of all of the ramifications and implications of the last 18 months and the changes that happened with the lockdown and the pandemic? And how does the future look to you? Are you feeling optimistic? And how are things in Edmonton?
Yeah, well, hot,
yeah,
for sure. I think it's 30 degrees again today, but yeah, like we're really optimistic right now. Our team is busy. Things seem to be moving in the world. Here in Alberta, obviously restrictions are being lifted a little bit, so that helps. Yeah, so very, very optimistic about the next little while. To speak on some challenges about COVID that we faced is I think the biggest one for us has been the hiring. The hiring coming out of COVID, and I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I think it's useful to share if any other entrepreneurs out there are dealing with this struggle. I think it's a lot of people are dealing with it. This has been our toughest year ever for hiring. And then any other feedback that I'd like to provide. So I'm part of an organization called EO, so Entrepreneur Organization. And I think I just want to give that a little plug because it's helped me so much. And what it's really done is it's given me a safe place to be vulnerable. And once again, I go back to my example about our bookkeeper there, and when we lost that money, is it gives me an opportunity to ask some questions that I necessarily don't feel comfortable asking a guy in a boardroom, and I kind of feel silly, but it gives me a place to bring my issues or challenges every month. We meet once a month, and it just gives me an opportunity to open up and get advice from other entrepreneurs and other industry people. And it's been amazing for me, both personally and professionally. So I think and it doesn't have to be with EO by any means, but I think mentorship or peer-to-peer learning, so anything that an entrepreneur can do to get themselves in that sort of situation is a huge catalyst, in my opinion. It's truly something that everyone should have. And once again, it just goes back to being vulnerable, right? I think everyone needs a platform and needs an opportunity to be able to be vulnerable.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think, that's one of the things too that we try to do with the Canada's podcast, is to create that environment and that community across the country where people can learn from each other and learn not only from your successes, but also your mistakes. So really appreciate you sharing a bit of your story today, and really nice to have you on the show. If anyone of our listeners wanted to find you online, where would be the best place? Are you on LinkedIn, or how could they connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So just as it sounds, Adam Temple, and that's about it. I try to steer away from the other social media platforms.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for your time today, and wish you all the best for the rest of this year and well into the future. And thank you for being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Bonnie. I appreciate your time.